Hi, I'm Roy Duffy. I was president in 1996 and it certainly was an eventful year. I was approached by the founder, Harry Marchant, and they were having problems and they had a committee of 20 and the attendance was down to an average of 18 a week. And he came and said, look, the club is going to fold, would you come on the committee and see if you can help? So I did that, and there was a process where you went several years on the committee, then you became vice president, then you became president. It was obvious the club wouldn't last, so I decided to stand for president with the backing of the founder of the club. This was the first election they'd had since the founding of the club. They'd been appointed and the committee and the whole executive had been appointed each year and been just handed down. Of the 20 on the committee, I only had one vote. One person who was supporting me, Paul Hankinson from Forsyths, and they thought, well, why is he bothering, because it's not his turn. But I read the Constitution and found that you could have proxy votes. We turned up at the annual meeting and instead of the usual 20, there was about 40 there, 20 of my supporters, but I also had 150 proxies, which made it quite humorous really, because when it came to counting the votes, people said, well, why are you bothering? You've got 18 in one pile and 160 odd in the other. So that was the only person elected. The rest of the committee stayed, and I elected with Paul as my vice president. It then became, they contacted the Herald, and it was front page at the time. It was massive. And they said, he's not changing the club. And we had our first meeting to plan the speakers for the year at my home. And they'd already rumour around town. I had 15 former presidents on the committee and 2 whose turn it was to go in, and myself. So I had a white clipboard, white paper clipboard, and I said, right, this is my speakers list for the first 3 months. And they were standing up on our balcony with their arms folded. And I said, right, here they are. The first one is I want to start with somebody doing sketches. We all have a writing pad and charcoal, and we have a little stage with a curtain. And we'll have a speaker on the difference in light and shade in drawings. So I hummed and hawed and thought that was interesting. Yes, there was no real problem with that. Then one chap said, well, what's the little stage in the curtain for? I said, well, that's for the male and female nude. Well, to say that there was nearly heart attacks was, and they sort of screamed as one, we're not having nudes in the business club. While they were still in panic, I flipped over and said, right, here's the, if you're not happy with that, how about these speakers? And as long as there was no nudes, they were so happy. And it was then after it, they realised that I'd dropped the mayor, who had also been the opening speaker for the previous 40 odd years. Not the same mayor, but different mayors. And the Herald rang me and said, we've been approached by your committee, or a member of your committee, that the mayor of the city is not speaker this year. Is that correct? I said, yes, that is correct. They said, on what grounds? I said, on the grounds that he gives the vision for the city for the year, and he doesn't have any vision. And they said, well, there's a rumour of who you've replaced him with. He said, it's so ridiculous. I said, well, I don't discuss rumours. And they said, well, there's this one is just berserk, bizarre. And I said, all right, I'll give you one guess who was it? They said, I said, well, we've heard that Max Gillies, the comedian, is coming up. I said, that's correct. And he said, he's replacing the mayor. I said, yes. He said, how did you come to that conclusion? I said, he is far funnier than the mayor. So this again was front page, Max Gillies to open the business club. So instead of the usual 20, we had 150 and people waiting to get in. Also did a deal with Harry Miller, who was an entrepreneur in Sydney at the time. He was charging $10,000 for a speaker. I'd arranged for the Herald to run an article on every speaker that we had, a feature article. It was held every week. And I said to Harry, I can get you into the Newcastle market, which you haven't got, but you've got to give me a free speaker once a month. So he gave me some of the best speakers, including Perry from Tap Dogs, which again, I got a deputation because they didn't think Tap Dogs were in business, although they have a massive business. We had the absolute top, the Attorney General, the Reserve Bank Governor, and probably the biggest one I was able to get was when I managed to get the Archbishop of Canterbury. And that was quite comical because I had to sign a secrecy document because he was coming to Sydney, and when he announced what he was doing, meeting with the Premier, etc., and then he said, I'm coming to Newcastle on the Tuesday, and the Herald had a reporter at Parliament. I said, we don't know anything about it. So they rang the Lord Mayor, no, knows nothing about it, rang the state member, the federal. I said, I know who's behind it. So they rang up and the Herald said, are you bringing the Archbishop of Canterbury? I said, yes. He said, how did you get him to come to Newcastle? I said, well, again, this became front page, and they ran a picture on it. So I had to get him because the Pope wasn't available, so I settled for the Archbishop of Canterbury. We had that in the town hall, and because you just couldn't get him. He was number 3 or something to the Crown. But we had a lot of speakers. Up until then, women were only allowed to come twice a year to the business club. Ladies' Day. And I opened it to all ladies at all times. They also had a rule that no business was to be discussed at the business club, which seemed quite berserk, so I introduced a 5-minute speech about your business. So Paul Hankin took over and it continued on, but it was a weekly process, and at one stage they used to print previous years' graph of how many attended. They stopped it after 4 weeks because it was quite ridiculous, because we had to get bigger rooms and people would turn up in their hundreds for some of the speakers. We used to go to different venues if the speaker was so popular that we knew we couldn't possibly fit them in, and it got that way that it became obvious that it was the place to go. The Herald ran feature stories every Wednesday morning on what the speaker had said and a photograph. They ran an ad prior to it happening, and we usually had 1 or 2 radio stations there, plus the TV too, every week to cover it. So it was a different era, a different attitude, and we captured a different group of people. But also when Fiona stood for president, I was a campaign person, which caused a lot of... a few people resigned actually over the fact that a woman was going to be president, and that's typical of it. Things are just different, and that's, they're unbelievable, the changes in the community. We had Murray Tyrrell, who was one of the personalities of the Hunter as a speaker, and Murray always insisted on bringing bottles of wine and giving each table a couple of bottles of wine. But the company had been taken over and was then on the stock market. So when we sat down, he said, Roy, I'm told I've got to stay to the script. I'm not allowed to answer anything. This is not going to be the Murray we know. So I said, well, look, before you start, can you tell us how you come to win the Chardonnay, or best Chardonnay in the world? And I said, the Herald are here and they'd like to know. Well, he went into an abuse about the Herald and what he thought of them. He said for years they'd had the wine where they'd shared clippings, and this vineyard next to Lindeman's had brought out this new grape variety called Chardonnay. So he said, I went over and asked, could I have some of the cuttings? And they said, certainly not. And he said, I was horrified because we'd always done that for over 100 years. And he said, as I was going back, one of the gardeners said, Murray, go down near the third tree tonight, I'll throw some cuttings over the fence. So he said he did that. He said 4 years later we had our first crop. He said, well, they weren't bright enough to know that they were the only ones in the Hunter Valley with Chardonnay, officially, and yet we entered the Chardonnay competition and we won it. And it had to be their grapes because there was no others. He said, then we had a really good crop and we thought, this is a really good crop. So he said, Cessnock is not a big city, but their wine show is good. He said, we came fourth at Cessnock. And I said to our vineyard, we should have done better than this. So we went to Royal Easter, we came third. And he said, this is the best wine we've ever made as a Chardonnay. He said, where else can we go? He said, well, you can go to South Australia, they have a big wine. So he said, we went to South Australia and we came second. He said, it looks like the further you go from our vineyard, the better they think our wine is. He said, and they said, well, do you want to go to Perth? He said, no, bugger it, let's go to Paris. So he said, we went to Paris. He said, we won best Chardonnay in the world. He said, the New York Times put it on the front covers. Where are you bastards from the Herald? Page 6, don't drink my wine.
Visit www.newcastlebusinessclub.com.au to learn more.